Hey guys, and welcome back to the class guide part 2. So, in this part, I'm going to cover the remaining 8 classes, as well as kind of clear up how I'm rating the classes. So, 3 stars is the average rating I can give a class. It means that the class doesn't perform any better or any worse than any other class at its given role, be it PvP, PvE, or in difficulty. It's a fairly average class all around if it receives 3 stars for each. 1 star is really bad at PvP, really bad at PvE, or very low difficulty and very easy to pick up. Conversely, 5 stars is very good at PvP, very good at PvE, or extremely difficult, pretty much as difficult as a class can get to play in Black Desert. So, just to remind you, none of these ratings are set in stone. They are all my opinion. None of them are sort of based off of any particular guidelines. They are all my opinion based on having either played the class, played against the class in node wars or duels, or having talked to friends and guildies that have these classes at level 60 or 61 and at least about 480 to 500 gear score. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. So resuming from last part, I'm going to go with the ninja's partner, the Kunoichi. The Kunoichi in PvP only gets 2 stars for large-scale PvP. She's not very amazing in large-scale PvP. She's a flanker. In the Zerg, she can't really do too much, but in single target, so basically duels, she gets 4.5 stars as one of the best duelists in the game. Her combination of multiple crowd controls, high damage, and very slippery forms of evasion make the Kunoichi an absolute nightmare to deal with in 1v1 PvP. For PvE, she has similar woes to her problems with large scale. Her lack of AoE, as well as her slightly less impact mobility compared to an average class, make her worse at PvE than most of the other classes in the game. For difficulty, the Kunoichi gets 5 stars, as the Kuno is one of the more difficult classes in the game. The Kunoichi is the female shinobi. Pre-awakened form is practically identical to the ninja. Once awakened, her saw chakram is a giant sort of hollow frisbee that she uses to sort of dance in between the enemies and literally hula hoop them to death. Moving on, we have the Musa. The Musa is the Korean version of a samurai. He uses a blade that looks vaguely like a katana without a guard, as well as a horn bow in his pre-awakening, and once awakened, he gains access to the crescent blade, a massive polearm or glaive, which he uses to turn into an assault helicopter that is also on fire and spin through his enemies. In PvP, the Musa has 4 stars, but he's sort of on the lower side of 4 stars. He's very good because he has huge amounts of mobility, but the Musa tends to have a problem at lower levels of AP, as breaking through guards, as well as killing opponents without being able to crowd control them, is a very tough sort of scenario for Musas that cannot instantaneously one combo any enemy they manage to crowd control. The Musa, however, once you get to high levels of AP, will do very well in PvP, as he has huge AoEs that also have fairly decent crowd control properties applied to them. He's not the best PvP, but he's very good in both large scale, and single target. For PvE, the Musa is probably the best grinder in the game. He has insane between pack mobility. His massive AoEs are very spammable and let him sort of one-shot packs then move on. And he's very easy to use, with only 2 stars of difficulty, as there's not very many intricacies to playing Musa that are required if you want to be a great Musa. Obviously, a good Musa compared to a bad Musa will be fairly obvious, but you don't need too much to become a good Musa. The Maewha is the Musa's female counterpart. Similar to the Musa, she uses the blade and the hornbow in her pre-awakened form, with a few slight animation differences and a few small kit changes that do set the Maewha and the Musa apart. The most striking being on their shift Q, where the Musa has Rising Storm, a large AoE with the sword. The Maewha has Red Moon, which has her disappear and cut at enemies something like 10 to 15 times. It's a very cool looking skill. Once she awakens, the Maewha also gets a polearm, but hers is the carry spear. She is much more single target focused than the Musa, with very small AoEs that can put out large damage. Her mobility in fight, I would say, is better, whereas she can kind of dodge around more, but out of fight, just in a straight line mobility, I would give the edge to Musa. The Maewha's PvP, I have 3 stars for large scale and 4 stars for small scale, so 1v1s. In large scale PvP, the Maewha has problems with sort of getting into the fight and hitting large amounts of enemies. The Maewha's at her best as a flanker, similar to Kunoichi, aiming for the enemy's backline, wizards, and witches, aiming to kill them all in one combo and then get away before anyone else can come to revenge kill her. In PvE, the Maewha is not really amazing due to her smaller AoEs. Her between pack mobility helps make up for it, and she is very good at farming places such as Gaha's Bandits, but in general, the Maewha's PvE abilities are slightly lacking. For difficulty, I've given the Maewha 3 stars as she is more difficult to play than the Musa. The addition of certain skills in Awakening do make the Maewha a bit more challenging, and the lack of AoE means you do have to be more precise with your skills. Next up, we have the Berserker. The Berserker is a fairly middle-of-the-road class. He is a large giant that uses a huge pair of axes in his pre-awakened form. Once he awakens, he then gets access to one of the coolest weapons in the game. That is the Iron Buster, a massive hand cannon that he uses in very creative ways. He uses it to dash across the field by shooting it behind himself. He uses it to blow things up right in front of him. And he uses it to lay down suppressing fire. So the Berserker, he's a very cool class concept, but in terms of execution, he's very middle of the road. His PvP, I've given him 3 stars as he's very good at crowd controlling opponents, but with the more recent crowd control changes, the Berserker's ability to keep a single very important target completely crowd controlled has suffered as a result. In small scale, his CC abilities but lack of damage before high levels of AP mean that he will have difficulty killing his opponent in a duel. In PvE, the Berserker also gets 3 stars. He has surprisingly high amount of mobility. The Berserker's mobility is actually pretty insane. But his AoE does suffer from slightly longer cooldowns, and the Berserker's PvE grinding skills aren't really anything special. For difficulty, I've given the Berserker a 3, as while he's fairly easy to pick up and play, there are quite a few things that do separate good Berserkers from bad Berserkers, I've found as I've fought against Berserkers in Node Wars, and fighting against a good Berserker in a duel is actually pretty difficult, whereas a bad Berserker, you don't really need to worry about them too much as their damage won't be that threatening. Dark Knight is sort of the Sorceress's 2.0 class. It's like if the Sorceress got a few upgrades, a few small changes, and then a few things that people liked about the Sorceress were taken away, like the headphone jack, and shipped out as the Dark Knight. She has huge amounts of AoE. In her pre-awakened form, she uses the Kriegsmesser and Dark Magic to enhance her melee capabilities. She will dive at opponents and cut them up with Dark Magic enhanced strikes. Once awakened, she gains the Vidiant, which is a sort of glove that she uses to call dark spirits to help her attack. The Dark Knight is notable in her awakened form because once she awakens, she becomes a sort of mid-range fighter. In her pre-awakened form, she's pure melee. She dives at her opponents and uses her Kriegsmesser in very close range combat. However, once she's awakened, she sort of reverts to a sort of mid-range playstyle where she uses spirit magic to attack from a decent distance away. She does, however, gain a number of dashes in her awakened form that allow her to get close and then use her pre-awakened form for some quick damage before reverting to her awakened form to retreat while still attacking. In PvP, the Dark Knight has 3.5 stars for both large and small scale PvP. The Dark Knight has very good AoE, as well as long range attacks. However, in both large and small scale, she suffers from the same problem. She is a very squishy attacker who really only has damage going for her. She does not have a grab. She's very squishy, so if her block is broken, she will be killed. And the number of problems with the Dark Knight, it can basically be listed as, if you catch her, she will die. In PvE, the Dark Knight gets a 4.5. She is probably one of the best grinders in the game, just below the Musa. She has insane between pack mobility. She can murder most packs in a single spell, and her spells that can kill entire packs are actually spammable, which means she does not need to wait on cooldowns while moving from pack to pack. She can just kill them all. As a result, the Dark Knight also only has 2 stars for difficulty, as she is one of the easiest classes to just pick up and play. You can do really well with the Dark Knight within probably an hour or 2 of grabbing her Awakening and fooling around with it. She is a lot of fun, and she is very easy to play, an excellent beginner class. The Striker is Black Desert's Brawler class. The Striker uses sort of a mix of martial arts and street fighting skills to put the beat down on opponents. In his pre-awakened form, he uses the Gauntlet, which basically just means he's an unarmed fighting monk. And in his awakened form, he uses the Echo Spirit. He uses the Guard Brace to call the Echo Spirit, and the Echo Spirit helps him by fighting alongside and enhancing his attacks with flame elements. In PvP, the Striker has 4 stars, both large and small scale. His tankiness and his AoE mean that the Striker is able to dive in, get a decent amount of damage off, and dive out of the fight. In small scale, the Striker is one of the more terrifying classes to fight against, as he has a number of grabs and various crowd controls that he can land, and his damage is very high, which means if he catches you, he can usually kill you in a single combo. For PvE, the Striker also gets 4 stars. The Striker has pretty good mobility, combined with large AoEs, which, similar to the Dark Knight, allow him to move from pack to pack, killing them very quickly before moving on to the next pack. His difficulty, just like the Dark Knight, is also at a very small 2 stars. He does have a lot of very interesting intricacies of his kit, such as the sort of switching between pre-awakened and awakened forms that good Strikers can do. But in order to do well with the Striker, you do not need to learn these. You can do very well just by using the basic combos in his awakened form to murder your opponents. The Mystic is the Striker's female counterpart. She uses pretty much the exact same skill set with a slight more focus on kicking attacks in her pre-awakened form, and once awakened, she gains access to the Aqua Dragon Spirit. So, once awakened, the Mystic's attacks become a bit more defensive, and she uses a sort of Aqua Dragon that floats around her and empowers her attacks, allowing her to do massively increased damage and become a lot more mobile in her awakened form. The Mystic also gets a 4 for PvP, as she's even tankier than the Striker, very difficult to deal with, both in large scale and small scale. In PvE, the Mystic only gets a 3, as her AoEs are slightly worse than the Striker, and the Striker just gets a bit of an edge when compared to PvE against the Mystic. The Mystic's PvE, it's a bit better than most classes, but it's not so much better that I'm going to give her an extra star over 3 stars. For difficulty, the Mystic only gets 1 star, as she is one of the easiest classes in the game to just pick up and play. She's very tanky, which means that mistakes are minimized, and you can sort of get up again if you've been knocked down, and just playing the Mystic is very easy. However, if you want to learn the Mystic, she is very powerful in the right hands. Just because she's easy to pick up and play does not mean that a skilled Mystic will not bring the pain when fighting a less skilled Mystic. She is very powerful, and learning her will allow you to do a lot more than a Mystic that hasn't learned her combos or properly learned how to play the class. Notable about the Striker and the Mystic is they both take less damage from magic sources, which means they are the counter to Wizards, Witches, Sorceresses, Dark Knights, and any other class that does magic damage. If you are in a 1v1 against a Striker or Mystic as a magic dealing class, look out, they are going to be very difficult to fight. The final class in Black Desert is the Lahn. The newest of the 16 classes that currently exist, the Lahn is a very agile, Eastern-inspired martial artist who uses the Crescent Pendulum and a Noble Sword in her pre-awakened form, and once awakened, she uses the Crimson Glaives. In her pre-awakened form, the Lahn uses a sort of chain blade, so a Crescent Pendulum on a chain, to perform huge sweeping AoE attacks from just inside of what I would call mid-range. She is still reachable within a couple of steps, but she will be able to attack most classes before they can attack her. When she awakens, the Lahn gains a huge amount of mobility. In her pre-awakened form, she only has access to a single backdash, as well as her iconic Nimbus Stride, which allows her to sort of soar through the clouds. Once awakened, though, she gains forward and side dashes, and becomes very mobile, as well as gaining a number of low cooldown skills that she can easily use to combo most players to death. The Lahn also has the longest range grab in the game, which allows her to sort of dominate players in 1v1s if the grab lands. However, she only gets 3 stars for PvP because her AoE and survivability isn't as high as it would really needs to be for large scale. And in small scale, the Lahn is far too dependent on the grab. If you can bait out the Lahn's grab and then catch her in your own crowd control while it's down for about 11 seconds, the Lahn will usually lose the duel. Of course, on the contrary, if the Lahn lands a grab on you, you're probably going to lose, as she can usually one-combo most players if she lands the grab. In PvE, the Lahn gets 4 stars as her awakened form gives her enough mobility and AoE that's fairly spammable to move between packs very quickly, killing a pack and then moving on to the next. For difficulty, I've given the Lahn 3 stars, as the Lahn is not exactly a difficult class, but she's not an easy class either. It will take some getting used to the Lahn's kit. Compared to the average class in Black Desert, she's fairly standard for difficulty, but she is certainly much harder than the Mystic or the Striker or the Dark Knight. Anyways guys, those are all 16 classes that currently exist in Black Desert. Comment below what you think about my ratings on the classes. Do you agree with how I rated the classes? Do you disagree? Did you think I omitted a key part of information about your favorite class? Comment below. Anyways guys, as always, subscribe if you liked it. Hope everyone enjoyed and learned from this video, and have a good one.